Hello and welcome to the webinar Developing Visual Scheduling Extensions with the VSADT from Netronic. I'm Sascha Hermann, your host for the next hour, and I would like to show you our product, the Visual Scheduling Add-in Development Toolbox, and well, give you first, as a preface, an overview of the product itself for all the new people who are on the call here and haven't seen it before, and for all the others who are already using or knowing the toolbox. I would like to give you some heads up of new things in the toolbox and some tips and tricks and best practices how to use it. So to start off with, here you can see some screenshots of applications we have built on our own with this toolbox. The toolbox is a developing component, and we are making use of it on our own. So all our end customer products are using it internally as well. So but maybe start off with a general overview. So Dynamics 365 Business Central is probably for all of us a great ERP system and a really great technical platform as well to build applications on. But out of the box, there's a lack of graphical controls to work with. So especially rich visual controls which allow user interactions for data editing. So what we all know are typical list pages and card pages, and on these pages we have text boxes, drop-down boxes, etc. But as visual controls, the most things we know are pictures or some cue boxes, maybe these smaller charts here. You can make use of Power BI, for example, but really big graphical components, especially with interactions, are not part of out of the box of Business Central. But to let us fill this gap on our own, Dynamics offers the so-called Control Add-in object. And the Control Add-in object is a native object from the platform itself, and I copied over the text from the help page. The Control Add-in objects allows you to add custom functionality to Dynamics 365 Business Central. A Control Add-in is a custom control or visual element for displaying and modifying data within a page. So, and we are making use of exactly this object type with the Scheduling Add-in Developer Toolbox. So this toolbox can be placed, or this toolbox, I call it toolbox or better Control Add-in, is a new visual element, and this can be placed onto a page. On every Business Central page, you can just place as other objects this kind of control onto. This Control Add-in is provided with an API by which you can interact with this. So via this API, you can send data over to this Control Add-in, which should be visualized, and you receive events back from the Control Add-in on user interactions. So to give you a picture of this, so what I'm showing here is on the left side, this is probably your part. So you as an ISV who would like to develop a product and make use of a graphical planning board. You are responsible for the left side. You are building your ISV product, which relies on the Business Central platform and reads data and writes data back to the Business Central tables. You're developing this nowadays probably in AL, or if you have legacy code in CAL as well. And then you would like to make use of our Control Add-in. So And this is what we call it. CAI is the control it in. And with this control it in, when you put it on one of your pages, you can connect to it via function calls and by transferring objects we use in the control it in. So, and when something happens inside of the planning board, when the user, for example, interacts with it, you get events back. So all the things application-wise is on the left side and part of your development, and the visualization part and the action part is on the right side. This is the Netronic part. So to start off with, what we have as, when I go back, as objects you are transferring back and forth to the control it in. I will now list some of them and go through them quite quickly to give you an overview what we have here. So we'll start off with activities. Activities are is an activity of something you would like to do, and we show them as one activity per line in an activity view. So maybe I go to the next board and then you can understand it quite nicely. So if you know Microsoft Project, you know these kinds of views. And here we have, and this is the important thing, activities which are one activity per line, and these activities have start end dates. So so we have this project-like view, and activities can be grouped. So you have then a parent activity with sub-activities which are the children. So by this you can build up your hierarchy of different activities you wanna show and the user should interact with. And as an additional property, you can see here that we not just have activities which have start and end dates, but you see that we have activities here with some additional visual information, like due dates, for example. These are these diamond symbols, or here these thin lines, which we call baselines. So this is another set of start and end dates, which are fixed, which are not changeable by the user interactively, but they show or can be used to show where the activity was before the user moved an activity in time. Then we have these kinds of markers here that you can put some visual elements on side of the bar, like this black line on the left side, or these colored rectangles on the right side. We have a progress bar. This is here, this black line on the bottom, where you can show something like a progress, how much of this activity is already worked on. So dependent on the length, so you can set this by a percentage, so 20% or something like this, then the line would go until here. If you set it to 80%, then the bar increases. Or we have other visual styles of bars, so that you can show, for example, this kind of summary bar here, or we have additional properties to an activity like these here, these flags. So these are additional date values where you can visualize, for example, a start date that this activity cannot or shouldn't start earlier than this and should end at this point in time. So yeah, so these are the visual elements you can add to activities. In contrast to activities, on the other hand, we have a resource view, and the resource view consists on the first step on a list of resources. These are visualized as well, like the activities, one resource per line. A resource are no bars, they are just containers. So they are just containers for the upcoming bars afterwards. they can put in a hierarchy as well via parent IDs. And these resources should get calendars. Calendars are defined as working and non-working times, and these are assigned to resources. So, and what we see here now is that we on the left side have different resources. A no group resource where we have set the color to blue, for example. So you can, on every resource, you can set the background color or the text color, your text here. And what you see here with Linda, Mark, and Macy, these are child resources of the department 01. So by this, you can build your hierarchy because Mark has set his parent ID to department 1. And on the right side in the diagram area, you can see the white and gray areas. So and these represent the calendar information. So a resource needs calendar information so that there's working time. Initially, if you don't define a calendar, like on the no group, the complete line is gray. And gray means there's no working time. All the white areas are working times. So the department 01, for example, has a calendar defined that it works from Monday to Friday from probably 8 to 5, somewhere like this. And then this area is white. So and now we come to the place where we want to put something which needs to be done, called activity, onto a resource. And this is something we call an allocation. So we allocate an activity to a resource. And this represents a piece of work on this resource. And the special thing here is that there can be multiple allocations per resource. So this is not like in the activity view where you only have one bar per line, so one bar per activity, but here you can have multiple bars per resource. Let me show this. So here you can see these are still our resources with the calendars, but now we have these bars, and these bars have start and end dates and consists of internally so-called allocation entries. So every bar you see here is an allocation. But an allocation consists of separate allocation entries, and they visualize separate time spans inside of an allocation. So I can show it here. These are allocations where we have just one allocation entry from start to end. But here, for example, you can see that we have an allocation entry starting here and ending here by the O with a separate color set and a second allocation entry here at the end of the bar. So this can be used, for example, in the production environment where you have sometimes operations where which have a certain start and end date, but the resource is not working all the time on this resource, or on the resources not working all the time on this operation. So and by this you can highlight or colorize the time spans where this resource really is working on the operation. Then in this case, in this time frame here where it's white, the resource is not occupied by this operation, and then you have here an occupation again. Or on the other hand, what you can do is you can colorize different times in these operations. As well in the production environment, you have sometimes a setup time and a runtime, and by this you can distinguish these times inside of one operation. And then you set the one allocation entry for the setup time, give it another color than the runtime, which is here at the end. So, and then Let's try to have a look, not just at screenshots, but start this as well from the application. So here you can see the activity view, one activity per line. So we have sent over these activities by our function calls. So we have an activity object we are filling up in our code. Let me see if we can find it here. Just to show you some of them. These are the resources. Here we go. So here we have one of these typical activities. So an activity, this is a data structure internally as an JSON object. And to this activity object, you set certain properties. So every activity gets an ID. Here you can see the parent ID for the hierarchy. Then we have start and end dates. We have a table text, and we have a color, for example. And this is what then passed over. So this object here gets into a list, and this list gets passed over by an API call called add activities to the control it in, and then this gets visualized here on the right side. So, and when you pass them over and want to interact with them, and I move it now as an example, and I drop it, then you get an event. In this case, an on-drop event, which gives you the information what the user did interactively. So, but what you can see here as well, the bar flipped back to the original position. So when I move it here and drop it, so we don't change the data just by this user interaction in the planning board, but your application gets the information back where the user dropped the bar. And then the business logic decides, is it allowed to drop the bar at this position, and then can calculate the new position or the new duration of the bar. And when all of this is done, then you need to update this object again. If you don't do an update on this object, we don't touch it. So what you see here is just an event. So every user interaction in the planning board is not changing any data in the control it in, but just gives event back to your application, and you are in charge to update objects inside of the planning board. So, and here we had the other objects. So you can see these are not movable. It's just this bar which is movable. Summary, but the summary bar is movable as well. And when you move this one, you see that the other flags are staying in place as well. So you can align to this, for example, when you know, okay, this here at the end is the latest point in time where this bar can be dropped, then the user knows, okay, I shouldn't move it further than this. Okay, so this is the activity view. Then I switch over and open the allocations. By the way, if there are any questions in between, even though we cannot talk to each other, please use the chat window and ask any questions you have. So I get the chance to answer them directly in this call. So here is the same we saw on the screenshot. These are the allocations now. Here the same rule consists, if I move something and I drop it, I get the event. So, but the important thing or interesting thing here is that when we move something around, that we now, as we know non-working and working times via the calendar information, that we can include these information when we move a bar. So when you move a bar into a non-working time here, we know this already, and then we can calculate a new duration or a new length and end of time of this allocation to the next and shift it to the next day. So here we can include the information from the calendars into this movement. And when we drop it, then you get accordingly these start and end dates again. So you can move these horizontally or vertically as well. So we have something when you start moving that it snaps to one direction. So now you can just move up, down, or when I start to move horizontally with the first pixels, then I can move it horizontally, but you can circumvent this snapping when you press the shift button, and then you can freely move around wherever you want to move and drop it then where you would like to drop it. So, and then in the event you see new start end dates and on which resource you dropped it, because here the new row object ID, this is the ID of the resource we dropped, the bar.
So Sasha, there are two questions that just came in. Maybe we can answer them directly. So the first question is, after dropping the allocation, do you need to just update that allocation, or do you need to re-render the whole board?
No, you can just update this single allocation. So especially performance-wise, don't update the whole board. So we have all the data inside of the planning board, and when just one allocation or activity or whatever is moved, you get the information from this single element you changed. So in this case, it's the allocation 010. So with this new values, and then you can recalculate this allocation and then just update this one. So you don't need to update all of them again. So all others stay in place where they are. But if you, for example, if you move one allocation here and you have a dependent allocation which is linked, then your application needs to calculate this. So you calculate the predecessors and successors as well, and then you need to update these as well. So
then thanks.
Okay.
Then there's a second question, and that is it possible to see a daily view with 24 hours or working hours?
Daily view, so that you can just see one day. You can do this by, if I understand this correctly, you can do this by zooming into the time scale. So I skipped this in the introduction, but on the top you have the time scale, which defines, or first of all, when you initialize the planning board, you define the start and end date of the time frame you want to visualize. In this case, it's January the 5th until end of January, and you can now zoom in and out, for example, with your mouse wheel. When you hover over with the mouse inside of the time scale on top, where you can see that certain elements are getting orange as well, you can move either by your mouse wheel and zoom in and out. You can click and drag the timescale, or you can click on the highlighted elements, in this case here a day, and when you click on this day, then you automatically zoom in into this day, and this day now has a view just for this day, or is zoomed in. You can see here at the scroll bar that all the other time is still inside of the control, and you can scroll now to the next day, or you can, by these buttons here on the right side, you can now skip day-wise as well. So not sure, and by this button you can zoom out again. So this is the navigation inside of the timescale. Not sure if I answered now the question, or if I
you
got
did.
the question correct.
You did. We got positive feedback on the answer. So thanks.
Good.
They were the two questions that we had.
Good. And then maybe when we, because I think there was something with work and non-working time, we have the option that you can hide non-working times. So this is a good example we are looking at here now, because we have a lot of times here, especially always when the day changes, in this area here between around 6 in the evening and 6 in the morning, when no resource is working at all. So, and we can hide these areas as well. So not sure if I have it in here. Let me see. Show hide work-free periods. Does this work? Yes. So this is a standard functionality we have in our Control It-in. You can just set a setting, show or hide work-free periods, and then we automatically hide work-free periods which are distributed over all resources. So time intervals where every resource has non-working time are then hidden. So, and if I do this now here, you will see that now the time scale here on top changes a little bit. So in this week, if I zoom in, you see that here the days are now starting at 6 o'clock and ending around 6 in the evening. So all the time between 6 in the evening and 6 in the morning is now collapsed, which you can see by these two thin lines now here at the day change. And I disable this again, then you just have one line. Okay, so hopefully now I covered everything of this. Yeah, and as I said, if you have any questions, just come up with them. Okay, so this was a look at the activities and the allocations. What else do we have in the planning board? We have curves. So curves is something where you can show the capacity of a resource and the load of a resource. And this is something you can see here. On the left side, the assembly department is our resource. And then we have a curve object, which has where you can set certain points in times with certain values. So the capacity curve, for example, is this outer line here, where you can, in this case, the definition is that start of the 25th, we have a value of 1,440, and then the next point in time is the 30th. Here we set it to 0. So we have always these point in times here where we just change the values of these curves. So you need to set these values here, and then we can draw this stepwise curve. So this is so we have two curve types at the resource. The one is the capacity. The capacity curve is this outer line, or is shown as this outer line, and we have the load curve. And the load curve is from the value points, it's a similar definition, but we just visualize it in another way because the load curve is filled to the bottom with a certain color. And if you get an overload where the load curve crosses the capacity curve, then we have an overload, and this overload is typically shown in red. But you can customize these colors on your own. Next things we have are links. So you can link activities or locations to show dependencies, for example. And here you can see we made use of these allocation entries because these gray parts here show a setup time, and then the blue one is a runtime. And we have another building block in our visualization, which is called an entity or entities. So we have, additionally to the left side, we have a table section on the right side, but inside of this table we don't show resources or activities, but a more versatile or uncategorized element, and we named it entity. And you can put here whatever you want as an object, or whatever you want to plan in your planning board. You can put in this list. So, and then if these things are not planned yet or not assigned, you can make use of this table on the right side to drag things over into the planning board. So best thing is that I show this. I think then things get a bit clearer. And therefore, let me switch the project.
While you do this, I'm answering the next question that we got. And yes, of course, we are recording this and we make this available on our YouTube channel, the recording, and on our website latest on Friday this week. So there will be an option for you guys to see the webinar again on our YouTube channel or on our website under recorded webinars. Sorry, Sasha, now it's up to you again.
Okay, thanks. So typically when you're working with a planning board, you have certain allocations inside of the planning board already. So, but what are you doing with things which are not planned or not assigned yet to a resource? How can a user assign these not assigned or unassigned tasks, and where can you put them inside of this planning board? Because every bar you put here would be already assigned to a certain resource. So, and therefore we have two options. One option is that we do this via this entity table on the right side. So this entity table on the right side can then be used that you put all your unassigned tasks or jobs or whatever inside of the right side, inside of this list. So the structure is the same like the resources or activities. You have entities and you have a parent ID. And by this, you can build up your hierarchy. So here I have an entity called job A, and I have an entity task 1, and task 1 has set its parent ID to job A. So in this list, you can just scroll up, down, collapse, expand, etc. For every collapse, expand, you get events as well. And then you have the option that you can take one of these elements here and then drag them over here. And then, for example, here I drop it on Marty, and then I get an event. Okay, I dropped now the backlog element here, job A, on the resource Marty at the 17th of January 9:30. So by this, you have the visual element to have things here on the right side and assign them to your resources on the left side. So as said, you just get the event. To create now an allocation here or create a bar here, what you need to do is that you create a new allocation for Marty then for this job A, and then if you want to remove this job from this list because this job is then already assigned, you need to remove it from this entity table. This is not automatically removed because then you can use this table as well for recurring actions as well. So then you can drag this over and over and over again to resources and just have this as a template allocation. So, but what you saw here is when I drag this, we just have a line. So you get the point in time where I dropped this entity. But we have the option to give these entities a duration as well. So, and for the task 1 to 3, I added a duration as well. So because I could foresee, okay, task 1 needs 1 hour probably. And when I drag this over, we are not showing just a line anymore. You can already see how long this activity probably would take. So, and here I have a duration of 1 hour. And when I drag over task 3, I have set this to 3 hours, and then I get the info accordingly. So the right side or this entity table is a good thing to hold unassigned tasks where you don't have any time information when this task needs to be done, but you just have a duration information, for example. Then this is pretty usable. But often there are times where you already know when a certain activity should be done. And then it would be nice to show this in a planning board already.
So Sasha, before you move to this, there are 2 questions there's one question on the entity table. So the question is, can the entities have multiple collapsible levels? So for example, job A, task 1, subtask 1, 2, 3. So now you have...
So yeah. Same as for resources and for activities, there's more or less so we have no limit, I would say. So it's always, you have one element, and when you define the parent ID, then this element gets a child from this parent. So and this could be done for job C, for example, as well. When you set the parent ID from job C to that the parent is job A, then this would be get a child from job A. And by this, you can get multiple levels. So there are not just 2 levels, but more or less indefinite. Okay, so there were 2 questions, Martin?
No, that was the one. There was a question and the example given. So, and we already got feedback that you fully answered the question. So now let's move away from the entity table to where you wanted to go. Thanks.
Yeah, so then when you have activities where you already know that they are planned for example, Wednesday, but not assigned to a resource already. So there we have a new option, I would say. So the one thing is, and this could be done here as well, that you create a new resource and name it unassigned resource, for example. And then all your allocations you already know can be put in this unassigned resource, and then you drag these bars from top to bottom into the other resources. But if you have this unassigned resource here on top, for example, and then you scroll down, and want to assign something here to Leslie, for example, this is really hard to drag from the top to the bottom. So, and therefore we created something new. And let me hide the entities table and then show the top view area. So what we have here is I have a resource which is called unassigned tasks, and this resource has allocations. So, and these allocations have start end dates. So here I already know when they needs to be done. So, but what we have now is we have a top area here, which is fixed. And now I can scroll down on the bottom through all my resources and then grab an allocation from here and then assign it, for example, to Francis and drop it here. So this is pretty usable for things where you already have time information. And then you can see, okay, this is unassigned. Where do I have capacity here on all my resources? And then assign it accordingly to these resources. So this is pretty usable when you already know when they needs to be done. If you don't know when, then this entity table is pretty useful, because then you can just drag them over and place them there. Okay, so this is already the section then regarding tips and tricks and best practices. So if you have time information, make use of these things here. If you don't have time information, just durations, for example, then put it on the right side. So, and technically what we have done is, or how, question is how you can make use of this. So this is a standard resource, but we just set an additional property called view area. And if you set this property accordingly and activate that, you get this top view area here, which is a setting of the control add-in, which says, okay, I want to show or hide top view area visibilities. Then all the resources which have the property set that they should be shown in this top view area are listed here. So I did this now with only one single resource. You can do this with multiple, but for this example here with the unassigned task, a single resource should be sufficient. So, and this is fixed here, and you can scroll around in the bottom area. Okay. So I already described the top view area. What else do we have? So it's visual building blocks in the control add-in. We support datelines. So datelines are just vertical lines from top to bottom at a certain point in time, and they can have a certain line style, line thickness, and a certain text. So, and they can be fixed or they can be draggable. So, and these can then, for example, be used to show certain due dates or certain start dates for operations or whatever. And the benefit is here that this line is from top of the chart to the bottom. So when you scroll up and down, you will always see this line. So if you have, for example, predecessor and successor operations and always want to see when a certain job starts or ends, then you can show this with these lines, for example, and even if the predecessor is out of the view and scrolled up outside the chart, you would see when this starts by this line. So, and the second thing we have is the so-called period highlighters. So In the background of these resources, I already told you that there are gray and white areas showing or representing work and non-working times. But sometimes you want to explain that certain timeframes have certain reasons. And here I marked, for example, that Lina is in the third week of January is in holiday. So then this time frame would not just be a non-working time, but you can highlight this, that this non-working time would be holiday as well. These are just color blocks, so they don't define any working or non-working time. So if this should be non-working time as well, then you need to set or update the calendar accordingly that this gets non-working time. So these are just, to say it simple, just colored blocks. So, but here you have just the option, besides the gray-white shading in the background, that you can certain time frames colorize. So, and I have this as an
before you switch over,
well.
Maybe one question. And the question is there a non-draggable dateline that denotes the current time of day so that you can see where you are in the day planning-wise?
We have a so-called work date you can set on the control it-in, and when you have this work date set, we draw a line on this work date, and this is a fixed line just at the start of the day, I think. But I can show this here as well, and let me add and set then. So what we see here, so typically my settings, so the workday of Business Central is the 26th of January currently. So, and in this example, I pass this over as the work date to this control it-in, and then you can see this black line here, which starts on the 26th, and this is not draggable. So this indicates the work date. This is not updated automatically so that it shows the exact time now, but this could be done as well by yourself. So what I want to show now is here you have another date line, and here I just set a date and a time to it, and then this will be shown. Let me show it by code. I got it here. Yep. So here, this is everything you need to do to create a dateline, dateline object or JSON object with, at least two properties. You need an ID to identify the dateline, and you need a point in time where this should be positioned. And here I have put a caption on this as well, so that you get a text on the side. So, and this is not draggable. You can change the line styling here as well. So this is red and a little bit thicker. And on the third line here, I said that this should be draggable as well. And you can see you can put the text on the right side and have it horizontally instead of vertically. And now when I drag this, you get events as well where it's dropped, and then you can act accordingly. You can update datelines as well. So, and if you send an update to this dateline with a new value, then this dateline would be moved to the new position. So, and by this, for example, you could create a dateline on your own, which should get periodically updated for example, every minute, and then you can update the point in time value accordingly, and then you would have a view where this line slowly moves with every minute and gives you the actual time. I hope this answers the question.
Yeah, it did.
Good. Yeah, so these were datelines and the period highlighter. Additional things, we have symbols. You can put symbols. You could put them on the bars before, on the top left and the top right. We now extended these that you can put symbols on the left, so in the middle of the bar on the left side and on the right side. So we got 2 new positions, and you can place a symbol inside of the bar now. And you can place symbols inside of the table as well. We have a context menu object, so which defines which elements in a context menu should be shown, and then you assign this context menu to an object, in this case to a bar here, to an allocation, and when you then do a right click on this allocation, this context menu shows up. So, and every entry has an ID as well, and when you click on one of these entries, you get an event back which says, okay, the user clicked on this allocation, this context menu entry, and then you can act accordingly. Next thing, and this is new, is the so-called word view. And this is useful if you really have big planning boards. Then this world view gives you a high-level overview and a navigation support in big planning boards. And I have a project for this as well. Let me just switch over. There we go. So we have a big, I make it big now. So we have a bunch of resources here. And if I zoom in here, it's hard to navigate because you don't have an overview where you are and where all your bars are. So, and therefore you can now show the world view. And the world view is this overview, which is then in this case shown at the bottom. You can define if it's on the bottom or top or left or right. And now this rectangle shows you where I am here in the planning board now. If I scroll now upwards, you can see how the rectangle at the bottom moves. So it shows you where you are in the planning board. And the more interesting thing is that you can drag this rectangle here. So, and then you can easily navigate in a really big planning board and move around and see, okay, here are my bars, and this is the detailed view, but here you can see the overview. And when I scroll up and down, you see this here on the left side as well, where you are in the table, and by this you can scroll up and down as well. Okay, so this is a new feature in this this version, which should help if you have really big planning boards to navigate inside of this. And then this last thing is, and this goes in line to the explanation I did with the Dateline, which should get updated periodically if you want to use it, for example, as a watch. We have an event or a trigger called onPing. So, and this on ping trigger or event from the control it in can be used, for example, to support periodic updates, that on every event, when the on ping event comes up, you do an update of the planning board. So you can define how often this on ping event should show up by milliseconds. So, and this can be used for periodic updates, or as well, if you set it, for example, to 10 seconds or a minute, this could be used to keep alive the server sessions. So if you have the planning board open and nobody is using the planning board, or at least they can, maybe they use the planning board by scrolling and looking at the planning board and zooming in, out, scrolling around, etc. This does not create any interaction with the backend. So, and by this, even though the user is using the planning board, the connection will time out. And with this on ping event, you can keep alive this server session, and then you don't get these annoying, you need to log in again because the session dropped. So, and this is pretty similar to the old ping pong control, which was part of the role-tailored client, or could be used inside of the role-tailored client and was provided by Microsoft. This was exactly the same, where you call the function ping, and then with a millisecond value, and then after these times of milliseconds, you get a pong back. So, and here you just set a setting that you want to get a ping every 5,000 milliseconds, for example, and then every 5 seconds you get this event. So, and let me show this. So everything you need to do is that you update the setting of the control add-in and set the add-in ping time in milliseconds value. If you set it to 0, then it's off. If you set it to a certain value, here I set it to 5,000, then you get the, here we are, you get the on ping trigger. So, and when we let this run, and then now activate this. So now after 5 seconds, I should get message box on ping. So, and this message box is not interfering this. In the background, the control add-in is still counting the values. So if I click now yes, you see now all these pings piled up. And this should help you to do these kinds of periodic updates, for example, where you can check in the background if anything changed in BC and that you need to update certain allocations, or just to keep the session alive and not dying. Okay. This was the on ping event. So, and then, yeah, to recap, when you download our control add-in, you get documentation for this as well. So as a starting point for all of them, for all people who don't know the planning board or the control add-in yet, start looking at the documentation first. Best thing would be to first read the resource planning model, which explains the concept of the control add-in and our data model. Then the functional definition document, which gets into more detail, and the IDD explains all the objects with all the properties you can set. So this is the resource planning model, which is described in the documentation with all the elements I already showed more or less, with the activities, the allocations and the resources, etc. Please have a look at the documentation. This should be helpful. So, and then just keep in mind, please, the developer toolbox is just a graphical component. It's a native object inside of Dynamics 365. So you don't need to have any external connections or external hostings. It's just living inside of Business Central and inside of this framework. The connection to the application data and sending this data to the controller then is part of your application, and reacting on events and fulfilling the underlying business logic of the application as well. We showed this picture before. Internally, our controller then is developed in HTML JavaScript, so therefore its natural living space is the web browser, and we highly suggest to use the Chrome browser, because all the others are performance-wise not that good, I would say, or in terms of Internet Explorer are really, really bad. So it can be run in the Windows client as well, in terms of if you still develop in CAL, but we don't really recommend to use it. Available with an AL and CL interface, dependent on where you are in your transition to Business Central. And as I said, the same controller then is used by ourselves as well. So, so we are making sure that this is developed and maintained, and in the future as well. How to get it? Go to our website, download the test version with all the documentation, all full functionality for 30 days with the license key you put in there. The license keys have an end date. So if you get a license key, this is probably usable for 30 to 60 days, more or less. And afterwards, you need to either update the license key to a new demo version, or best of all, you buy the controller then and get a full license key. Download it, test it, and ask questions. If there are no questions anymore, but come up afterwards, send me an email. And if you don't have any questions now.
There is one. So
okay.
The question is, how long will you support the CAL version of the toolbox? Maybe there are some plans for stopping / continuing supporting this version.
We don't have a plan currently to stop maintaining it. Maybe at a certain point in time we stop adding new features to it, but as we already have customers which are using the CAL version, we are still maintaining it. Well, internally, it's the CAL and the AL version are pretty much the same. So it's just a slight interface shell around it, which makes the difference. So therefore, as we are continuing with the AL version, I don't see any issue with maintaining the CAL version in the future as well. But then maybe the question back, how long do you need the support for a CAL version?
So no answer to this question so far.
Okay. Maybe you can let me know by email, because I'm really interested in this, how your plans are there, and what your requirements are there. But as I said, so there's not a big difference between the CAL and the AL version. So it's mainly the interface. The CAL version transfers .NET objects back and forth. The AL version is working with JSON objects. That's the main difference. So, but internally, the HTML JavaScript code is identical. So therefore, I don't see a big issue there. Okay. So there are no other questions. You see my email. You can send me an email and ask questions there, or start playing around with the control it-in. Yes, and then I think we're done. If there are no questions anymore, and I don't think so, then I wish you a nice afternoon or evening, wherever you are. See you. Bye.